Today, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is meeting with Vladimir Putin again in Moscow. This follows Russia's attacks in Kyiv. They were just abhorrent yesterday, leaving at least 12 innocent people dead, with President Trump pushing for an end to the war.
I have no allegiance to anybody. I have allegiance to saving lives, and I want to save a lot of lives. A lot of young people, mostly young people. It's the war. It's the soldiers. And if we can do that, also, as you know, I got started because the money that's been spent on this war is insane. It's a killing field. 5,000 soldiers a week on average. And we want to stop that.
So Fox News senior strategic analyst General Jack Keane, the president always makes that clear. It's his objective to stop the killing. Are they en route to stopping the killing?
It doesn't appear so, based on where we are, for a couple of reasons. One, Zelensky and his team accepted a 30-day ceasefire and, removed the condition. He wanted some kind of security guarantees to be able to do that. Russia was offered the same thing, and they have rejected it. And not only that, they have continued to focus on killing civilians, targeting civilians, because they want to break the will of the Ukrainian people and put pressure on Zelensky and also on our administration to make more concessions. That's what's going on. I mean, this is full throttle on the part of Putin. He is the problem here. He has been the problem from the beginning because he obviously invaded a country illegally. And he committed genocide. He's a thug, and he's a killer, and he's a war criminal. And he certainly only wants to go to that negotiating table and probably make a deal unless he's able to get concessions that make Ukraine very vulnerable to a future attack, because he has not given up one iota. Our intelligence services publicly have released information that demonstrates the fact that Russia fully intends to take control of Ukraine and then also other countries in Eastern Europe. That's his objective, and we have to keep that in mind when we're dealing with him.
General, you just told me something in the break I did not think was possible. The Ukrainians want to write a check to buy Patriot missiles, a defense battery, and we said no?
Yeah, we did. I'm not sure the reason why, but it opens up the door for an avenue that we really need to take advantage of. The State Department has a program called foreign military financing. That is direct loans where you can get military equipment, you pay back the loan at interest. So the government makes money here. Poland is buying tanks, helicopters, air defense systems, HIMARS, etc. Over $10 billion worth of stuff. The Ukrainians can do the same because now they have collateral in the rare mineral development and other things in the country. And also they obviously have some money because people have been giving them money. And that's what they wanted to do with the Patriot systems. We can take the American taxpayer out of this and fund Ukraine's military buildup rather significantly. Look at, if Putin is going to reject, which I think he's going to do, the deal, what then do we do? One, crippling sanctions would be option one. And two, upgun Ukraine. Upgun Ukraine to bring Putin to the negotiating table, not so Ukraine can continue to fight, but Putin pays attention to that military equation and who has an advantage there more than anything else, actually more than sanctions.
I just hope the president knows.
These are levers that we can use these levers.
I hope the president knows that this happens. Sometimes it happens beneath his level because this is defense. Who would not want to block a rocket from going into a city? Lavrov told Face the Nation that he says the President of the United States and I think rightly so that we are moving in the right direction and they are heading towards peace. They are ready to reach a deal. Do you believe the foreign minister of Russia? Just real quick, because I want to get to Iran, too.
No, he lies through his teeth. He's been lying for 25 years, just like the guy he works for. This is all the Russians' narrative, their playbook, their propaganda. Where's the evidence of that to date? They walked away from what was reasonable. The president offered them a 30-day ceasefire, not 6 months, not a year, not permanent, 30 days. Zelensky says yes, the Russians say no. That's where they really are.
by going this far, the president took political risk in giving Vladimir Putin a chance at peace. He better not embarrass the president, in my view, because he'll feel the backlash. He already got rebuked yesterday. So now tomorrow, third straight week of nuke talks with Iran. They named Michael Anton, senior State Department official, to lead the technical team on Iran's nuclear negotiations. How do you feel about where we're at right now? What do your sources tell you? What kind of progress is being made?
Well, we'll have to see. I mean, we know a couple things. One, Iran's not going to dismantle the program as we asked them to do, by a date certain with inspections and verification. Obviously, that's not happening. That's the same thing that Obama did, by the way. When they began negotiations in 2013, they told Iran to dismantle your program, give up enrichment, give up the centrifuges, give up your ballistic missiles. They balked, and then we accepted civil nuclear power enrichment. They kept their centrifuges and they kept their ballistic missiles. They eventually got real close to a nuclear weapon, as we all know, which is the concern we have today. The Iranians are masters at working these negotiations to their favor. So we have to keep an eye on this. Certainly, the administration wants a nuclear program that cannot even come close to weaponization. Mm-hmm. But even if you take away all the enrichment and leave the centrifuges and the ballistic missiles, they can get enriched uranium from many countries. We get it from 4 or 5 different countries, to include Russia. China, Russia, and North Korea all have enriched uranium. Why? Because they all have nuclear weapons, and they're their closest allies. So clandestinely, they can still get enriched uranium, and they keep the centrifuges to spin that and get it to a weaponization grade, and they keep the ballistic missiles so they can deliver it. That's what we have to be very careful of going forward here.
It got to be Americans on the ground watching the dismantling of that program in the way Libya did and South Africa did and Ukraine did. And that's just the beginning. I'm not sure the Israelis are going to sit on the side if they think it's a bad deal. General Jack Keane, there's so much going on. The Institute of Study of War helps unwind it on a daily basis, and you're chairman of that. Thanks so much, General. Have a great weekend. So, NATO chief Mark Rutte meeting with Secretaries Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio in Washington, and Mike Waltz, by the way, as U.S. plans to pull back on funding for the alliance. It's why NATO leaders are pushing member nations to pay their fair share, while larger countries like Canada and Spain are contributing under 2% of their GDP. You see these numbers right in front of you. Poland's off the charts. NATO Secretary Rutte joins us right now. Mr. Secretary, great to see you.
Good to be back on the program, Brian.
So it looks like we are going to put another $1 trillion into our defense budget. So we're not going to be the problem when it comes to NATO. But do you think that going to 3% and above is going to be possible for a lot of these struggling economies?
Yes, they have to make it possible. They have to do it, and they know they have to do it. And not only because President Trump says it's fair to equalize spending with the United States. That's one reason to do it, but also because there is the ongoing threat of the Russians. They are rapidly rearming themselves, so we know that if we want to achieve all the targets we need to achieve, that on the European side of NATO, the Canadian side of NATO, we have to move upwards from 3%. I'm pretty confident we can get there, and that the summit in The Hague will be a great success for President Trump to project American power at the world stage, but also for the alliance as a whole.
Sergei Lavrov yesterday said the Russians don't aim at civilian targets. Yet the cover of the New York Post today and the video that we have shows they're aiming at civilian targets with a woman sitting there all bloody. What do you say to that blatant lie?
It's terrible. What happened yesterday is a sign of weakness by the Russians, that they are not winning this. You are not going to put missiles, send missiles to residential areas outside Kiev. I was visiting the beautiful city of Odessa together with President Zelensky 2 weeks ago. That city is also under constant Russian fire. If you're winning a war, you are not going to do that. It is a sign of weakness. It is terrible. There are 12 people dead in Kiev. innocent people just living and going about their lives of every day, small children being hurt. We have seen all the footage. It really it cries your heart out when you see it.
So yesterday, Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky claimed Thursday that President Trump blindsided Kyiv's negotiators in London by switching out an initial appropriate strategy for a ceasefire with an unacceptable demand that we recognize that Russia owns Crimea, essentially. Did we blindside Kyiv?
No, but let me first of all say that it is thanks to President Trump that the deadlock is broken. It is the US, it is President Trump who is taking this leadership role, and it is only the US and President Trump who can do that, together, of course, with Secretaries Hexet and Rubio, and with National Security Advisor Waltz, being closely working with him to get this done. So that is important. But when it comes to this particular question, I'm not going to give a running commentary on every stage of the negotiations. But of course, there is a difference between acknowledging that parts of a country are occupied or saying legally that they are now part of a different country. Take the Baltics, Latvia, Estonia and Lithuania in 1950. The US and the world never accepted as a judicial fact, as a legal fact, that this was part of the Soviet Union. But we did acknowledge that Soviet Union was controlling. And history proved us right. In 1991, these three proud countries became independent again. So there is a difference, generally speaking, between legally saying it is part of another country or just acknowledging the fact that somebody has occupied that territory.
We want the fighting to stop. The world, everybody wants the fighting to stop. Russia started it, or else there'd be no war. Having said that, every 2 years, Russia will just take a different portion of Eastern Europe back. Georgia infiltrated Moldova, a vassal state of Belarus. The Baltic states are nervous. And of course, they've taken huge swaths, 19% of Ukraine. How far along are you in getting international troops into Ukraine after a ceasefire? And what would those countries be?
Well, let me be absolutely clear, and this is also what President Trump said before, what Secretary Hexet said before, that is that when it comes to a deal on Ukraine, it has to be durable, it has to be lasting. That means that Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, the president of Russia, should never ever try to catch another square mile of Ukraine, let alone try to catch a square mile of NATO territory in the future. And that means that he has to understand that when he would try to do that, the reaction will be devastating. That brings you to the question how to organize that. What will security guarantees look like? This is all part of the ongoing negotiations. We know that the French and the Brits are very helpful in putting together the ideas and the people to make that happen. And let's hope that we get to that moment soon. I must say, I'm rather optimistic at the moment about President Trump's efforts. I think we could get there, thanks to his leadership.
Yeah, I like our side. I just don't trust their side. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much. Always appreciate the time you give us, especially when you come to the States.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.